the cloud. Hi, Rick Tobin with mygigster.com, and I'm here with art and business lawyer Josh Lida, and I'll let him tell you a little bit about himself and maybe about how he got into his field. So, Josh, go ahead, take it away.
Morning, Rick. Hi, the My Gigster community. As Rick said, I'm Josh Lida. I'm the Director of Art and Business Law at Toy Trading Tribunal, PLLC. We are a law firm locally to us in Fort Lauderdale. And as Rick said, I handle art and business law. So since we're talking about My Gigster, I do help musicians and a lot of artists through the space. So some of the issues we'll sort of help people out with if they're musicians is, do they have a standard contract that they get used for gig musicians, right? Or for session musicians, if you're doing a recording session. How about with a venue? Is it a large venue? Are they going to be recording the show? Who owns the video? Are you going to get a cut of it? These are just some examples of specific situations people find themselves in. And so I do a lot of advising, a lot of consulting, and a lot of contract drafting as well as review. So that's sort of the day-to-day for me when it comes to the artist. And then, as we'll get into in a little bit, and Rick knows, on the NFT space side as well. So I help out everyone in the creative fields when it comes to NFTs.
So that's going to be fun to get into, the NFTs and the crypto, because I know people that, actually are making money doing that. And when you ask them how that works, some of them just say, you know what, I really don't even know. So we'll get into that in a little bit more today. Also, how did you get into your field, Josh? Tell a little bit about your background and how you ended up where you are.
Sure. So I grew up down here in South Florida, and my friends and I grew up just being creative kids. We would make movies. I would play guitar and listen to music or write books or poetry or draw. So we've always been really creative. And when I went to law school, my goal was actually to be an entertainment and then a craft beer lawyer, but that's another story for a different day. But those were the areas I was interested in, intellectual property, contracts, negotiations, because I think music or anything that's cultural based that allows people to have a conversation about something is really important. And I grew up, researching the history, artists and musicians getting taken advantage of throughout history. So I figured if I learned that stuff, I could maybe help them out. I got into the real law world, and I didn't work in entertainment straight away. And I did a little bit of beer law. I still do a little bit of beer law, but eventually I started this current firm with my two law partners. I used to run a firm with my father doing primarily criminal defense, but I expanded into business. And they said, why don't you do art law? I said, is art law a thing? And that was about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago now, and I researched it, and it is a thing. It's not very prevalent in South Florida, so I've been kind of, sounding the bell and telling people that I'm around down here on the visual art side of things, but there's a lot of overlap between the visual arts, the written arts, performing arts, and musicians. And I've always loved music. I remember in law school, the big thing was the 360 deals, right? Which was new at the time, where if you sign to a record label, they own you. They own your t-shirts, video games, everything, right? They got a piece of everything. And that was a big transition. And that was about 10 years ago. And now we're seeing another sort of wave of new entertainment coming into the music field with streaming services, SoundClouds, independent publishing, and then again, NFTs. So that's sort of my journey, and that's how it relates to music. But I've always been part of the creative fields, and it's just my passion to help people in that industry.
So is contracts is probably maybe for artists, for musicians, maybe the boring part of what they need to do to survive and to thrive. Is that the major part? Is that a big part of what you do?
Yeah, it's a major part. And so a lot of smaller or upstart companies, musicians, creatives will think that they don't need a contract, or that they know the person they're dealing with, so they can do it just orally. And there are such things as oral contracts, but when you don't put things down in writing, business sometimes creates odd situations and people react oddly. So maybe they are a good person and they made a bad decision here, right? And not the artist, but the person they're dealing with. And now the artist is out money, or they've spent their time and energy and got nothing out of it. So excuse me. So a lot of what I do is consulting. So it's like strategy. Hey, I'm going into this deal. Do I need a contract? And we'll discuss the legal issues that may arise down the road. And then they can make a decision. Do I want to hire Josh or a different lawyer and have a contract drafted up? Or do I want to take my chances? At the end of the day, it's usually up to the person to make their own personal decisions. But what I do is try to say to people, hey, look, this is what could happen. Here's the best way to mitigate it without having that occur in the future. And then you're at least prepared when it happens down the road. Because what's interesting is, let's say you are recording an album and it makes 30 grand. Okay. So you and the recording studio have to figure out what to do with the 30 grand. If there's no written contract and the studio is the one that collected the money, you might find yourself in litigation if you want to try to recoup the funds. So without a written contract, the court and the lawyers and whoever is dealing with that is going to have to look at the situation and try to see, A, is there even an enforceable contract? B, what was the actual contract itself? And C, what would the damages be to the artist, if at all? And the very specific nature of that interaction will govern the litigation. So you want to avoid all that guesswork, right? You want a contract in writing. If the other person decides to be a jerk, you have it in writing, you've documented your communications, you can go to a lawyer, it doesn't have to be me, it could be somebody else, and say, look, I have all these communications, here's our contract, it's signed, here's what I did, and you can take it from there. It's not a perfect system. There's obviously pitfalls all along the way, but it just gives you a plan. It's like an outline for the future, so to speak.
Almost like a marriage. It's always good to get those details. Ideally, when you're thinking with a clear head, and of course, when there's a lot of money on the table, that's when everybody has a different recollection of what the agreement was, right?
Always.
So,
yeah.
So we're talking about musicians, and mygigster.com is going to be designed mostly for musicians, but also supporting professionals and booking agents. And do you work both sides or different sides, or do you only work with the artists?
I work all across the board. I help companies. I've helped producers who work with artists themselves. So I help all across the board. And my logic behind that is, even though you might think naturally there's like a butting of heads between recording people or studios and creatives, I find if the party, so we'll say on the recording studio side of things, like if they have an attorney or an advisor who's helping them lay out their process in the beginning, if everyone's on the up and up, then it makes things easier for everyone down the road. So I like to help them as well. Part of what I like to focus on is forward thinking. So there's no reason you have to run your business exactly the way that the company that opened up 10 years before you ran their business. It worked for them. Maybe you're a different market. Maybe you have different goals. Maybe you want to try things differently or do things, add a nonprofit element to it, which is very popular with a lot of newer companies. So there's a lot of things you can do. And if you don't know what tools you have available to, so we'll use an analogy like this. When you're in a recording studio, right, and you want a specific tone for an album, the guitar behind you might sound differently than a different guitar. It might sound differently through a different amp or through a different process of recording. That can all have an impact on it. The contract side of things, and when you're working with somebody, whether you have a written contract or not, you're still interacting with each other. There's an arrangement going on there. Depending on the goals of each party is going to impact the end result. So I definitely help studios as well. Again, particularly when they're either starting a new project with a new artist, want to change directions, or they're just getting started, because I like to look forward. That's my big overarching recurring theme consistently to artists and creatives.
So what's the biggest or most common challenge, we'll call it, instead of dispute, or you call it whatever you'd like to, but what do you see that comes up the most often, maybe that somebody could easily avoid by talking to somebody, an attorney or taking some other actions?
Sure. So there's twofold. So I'll use a company for this side of things, right? So for a company, it is when a musician hires you to either record with you as a producer or a studio, that is a service. And generally speaking, you want to have some sort of process in place so that people who are retaining your services know what they're going to be getting along the way, right? It's like we we're talking about the communication at the outset. So where disputes sometimes arise is if partners are having discussed before they came to see me, hey, this is what we're going to do, X, Y, and Z, and they don't have that worked out. It's not usually a conflict. It's just usually trying to figure out practicalities. And again, I'm going to reiterate, focusing on that goal long term, right? What's the specific goal? Are you a ska recording studio? Are you a do anything under the sun recording studio, right? That's all going to impact the way you run your business. The second part with music would be the royalty aspect of it, right? Because you have multiple copyrights in a song. It's the recording copyright and then the underlying song copyright. And those are what's called intellectual property, which are intangible rights, right? We can't see them, but you can buy and sell them as long as it's legal under the law, which it usually is if it's done appropriately, in any percentage, in any unique, interesting way you want to do it. So, who's going to be going to ASCAP or BMI and registering the song? Who's going to be recovering the funds for any resale royalty streamings or anything like that? Or excuse me, not resale royalty, that's NFT stuff for visual arts. But just royalties, right, for streaming and all that, for streaming services, or if you license it to a contract, that's money that's going to flow to somebody. It's going to be registered in someone's name, and you need to know who's going to be recovering that, who's going to be divvying it up. And let's say one of the parties, questions the amount of money that was provided to them. You need a process to allow them to be able to look at those records, to have a right to look at the records. So it sounds scary and complicated, but it's something that can be dealt with early on. And then usually there aren't problems down the road if everyone's on the same page, but it's just in case there's an issue down the road.
Okay, let's jump to some of the fun stuff. Music and art have been around for a long time, forever, but technology is changing, and COVID changed the world, and technology is. What do you see happening now? What's the big changes you see going on lately?
So, I mean, I've referenced it a couple of times, but NFTs are going to change creative fields all across the board. Right now, I've seen the biggest change for NFTs on the visual art side of things. It just makes logical sense, the jump. And so for people watching at home, I'm not going to go through all the details, but for purposes of this, just think of an NFT as a verified receipt of ownership of something, right? It could be the guitar behind Rick. It could be the painting behind me. It could be digital assets. So digital art has latched on to NFTs because it just kind of makes sense. There's a simple visual representation, and the artist can receive what's called a resale royalty right? Because of the technology, it allows for the funds to automatically be dispersed. So I think technology is going to radically impact music as well. We've already seen a big rise in artists being independent over the last few years. Several notable acts made a lot of money on their own and got famous on their own before they signed to major labels. Chance the Rapper comes to mind. Migos were independent for a long time. And even independent labels grow and get larger. NFTs allow artists to more so control how they distribute their music and how they want to distribute their music. So I don't profess to know what the final result's going to be for the standard in the music world when it comes to that stuff. I do expect it to continue to have a major impact. We've already seen major artists release either an NFT album like the Kings of Leon or Tory Lanez, or Diplo has released singles where you can buy. Remember I was talking about the royalty rights, right? Well, we have an NFT platform that allows you to buy an NFT of the ownership rights of a percentage of the resale, or I keep saying resale, I apologize, of the royalties that you receive for this song, for the streaming. So that already exists. We already have people experimenting with this. I expect that to grow. And then sitting behind you, and you and I have talked about this off screen before, Rick's got this little Oculus here as AR, which is augmented reality. So it's different than the Oculus. Augmented reality would be like me wearing glasses and having things pop up in my glasses, right? So I get an email, it goes across my screen. Or I put on the AR and Rick, you and I can see each other in a almost virtual like world, right? That type of situation. I think that's going to impact music in a large way. I can't travel to Glasgow, right, and see or excuse me, to Glastonbury and see the Glastonbury Festival all the time, right? But maybe I can put on a VR and feel like I'm there. So maybe that's a new way to sell tickets. Maybe that's a new way for fans to interact with the artists. Maybe if you're a gig musician down here in South Florida, you can get a gig up in New York through like mygigster.com. Like, hey, I can essentially teleport in and we can do like a virtual sort of concert. Now, we're not there yet. We're not seeing anything in the real world that encompasses that, but the technology, I think, is going in that direction, and people are creative. They're going to come up with something fun and they're going to do it. And so I think NFTs are going to play a big role in that, as well as augmented reality.
Of course, there's people watching this. I don't know when they're going to be watching this, but there was a company once a long time ago, which is a long time ago is maybe a couple of months in today's terms, called Facebook, and now it's Meta, and they're jumping in on this, and this is definitely the future, and it's really up to people and up to businesses and up to society to figure out where that's going to go and how it's going to go. But like you say, I got these Oculus glasses. I think that's one day that'll be looked at like the abacus is to a computer now. There'll be either glasses or contact lenses, and you'll be able to see your own reality as you go places and walk through town and see things in whatever way you want. So that's exciting to me. So let's jump to crypto. Are you seeing people get? I mean, we talked about crypto. We talked a little bit about it in our last interview. Are you seeing people getting paid now in crypto, or are they asking for crypto? What do you see happening there in that environment?
Yeah, I have. It's not as prevalent as maybe we might think, on more of the established side of things, but people are interested in crypto. We definitely have people receiving payment in Bitcoin or Ethereum. If you release an NFT album, I mean, you're probably going to get paid in Ethereum or Tezos or one of those other coins. And there are challenges to that are easy to deal with for the most part, but it's about, people are worried about the volatility, right? So it's converting the crypto to a more stable, what's called a stable coin. It's worth like $1 to keep it safe. But even with that, you want to be careful because it's so early days in the technology, which coins you're investing in. But yeah, I was at a brewery the other day and I saw we accept Bitcoin. You see ads on the highway now accepting crypto, and I think we're going to see more and more of it. And again, that's a really interesting situation for musicians, because before we get to the AR concerts and the VR concerts, like the Fortnite one that Travis Scott did and all these other things, we have YouTube channels, we have live streams of albums. Well, instead of getting tipped through PayPal, although I think PayPal receives crypto, I'm not positive about that. So it's going to get more acceptable. You can tip someone in Bitcoin. You don't have to convert it to a euro or convert it to something else. You can send it to them directly, or Ethereum. That's going to become more standard as we go forward. You're going to have more options to interact. Maybe there's a universe, like a community-based music platform, and they have their own token, and you can tip people and build up levels within this, I'll call it a virtual jazz club, right? It's like a virtual jazz club. And you can tip them through crypto. So I think people are working on this. I can't put a timeline on it as to when it's going to be so standard that it's just part of everyday life for most people. But even in the crypto downturn, which when you and I are recording this is happening as we speak, they're calling it crypto winter. There's been more than one crypto winter, and we're in the middle of one right now. The technology keeps churning. People keep working. People keep experimenting. I just saw another NFT music video get released the other day by someone who's had success in the space, and she's an NFT, I think she's a rapper. She's an NFT rapper. So I expect to see much, much more of that going forward.
So I love to continue the dialogue periodically. Times are changing so fast. In the meantime, before we cut out, love to for you to give your contact information. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Please do it slow so that they can catch it with specificity. And if we post this where we can do comments, we'll put it in the comments as well. So go ahead, Josh.
I do talk very fast. So we will, my email is my first name, Josh, at twiglaw.com. So that's twig is like a tree. So Josh at twiglaw.com. Our website for Twig Trading Tribunal is twiglaw.com. And then I'm very active on Twitter. So my personal Twitter account, it's not legal advice, it's not a professional account, is ESQLIDA, right? ESQLIDA, like Esquire Lida. And you can follow me on there as well. Because so people know, if you're curious about learning about NFTs, crypto, that kind of stuff, Twitter is a great place to go. So I'm pretty active on there, and I like discussing these things. So please feel free to follow me.
All right, Josh, I appreciate your time. We're going to post this in mygigster.com. So that's going to be the site for musicians, for people in supporting industries, for connections. And hopefully we're going to get you back and do information like this that helps people and gives people more guidance. So with that, Rick Tobin, mygigster.com, check it out. And I'm going to